WIIT 88.9 exclusive radio, your man DJ Pat exclusive.
Doma T the Prophecy.
And we got a special guest in the building now.
John Q is a very iconic movie. And for those of you who don't know, man, John Q was about a man who fought for his child, man. His child needed a heart transplant. He went and held up the hospital so that he could force them to get a heart. He didn't have health insurance. It was a lot going on in that movie. It was an iconic movie. And, man, it hit our hearts, man. And what's crazy is I bumped into this brother by the name of Chetunda Tillman Jr. Am I saying their first name right?
Yeah, Chetunda Tillman Sr.
Senior. I apologize.
It's all good, maybe.
Yes. So let us know. First, give us the plot, and then tell us why you're here today.
So I lived an experience in the late 90s, and I was in the hospital with my child who was ill at the time, and we didn't have insurance. And so what happened was I had to plead with the hospital to do the surgery, and they was basically telling me no, and I had to come up with the money, and they wouldn't touch my child's case until I had those funds. And so I just began to write because I couldn't believe that in this country, you know, we are one of the largest bullies in the world, and we have the audacity to have an anti-bullying campaign. And so we go to war, we harass other innocent countries, we imprison African Americans, Latino Americans, and other indigent individuals, and I can't get health insurance. So I just decided to write in order to use my God-given talent, you know, for good. So that's how the idea came about.
That's a beautiful thing, man. WIT 88.9. You wrote this story, you know, about who's the story really about, man?
It's about myself and my child, and we was going through a situation where we didn't have health care, and that's the essence of the movie. And so going through that pain and suffering in that ordeal, I just began to write in order to collect my thoughts and to try to, you know, handle it appropriately. And so what happened was at the end of the day, I said, I have something here. And then I just decided to copyright it. And that was between myself and the Most High, because remember, I was in my early 20s. I didn't know anything about the entertainment industry, but God gave me that vision to copyright it, and I'm glad I did. And then after that, I tried to shop the film. Went to the Writers Guild. We had a conference, and they said, Mr. Tillman, we love your script. And they asked me specifically who I want to play. I said, I want Cuba Gooding Jr. or Denzel Washington, bottom line, because those were two of the greatest African-American actors at the time, and currently they're still extremely successful.
Absolutely.
So when they said, hey, you can have whoever you wanted to have in it, I said, great. So I decided to go with Denzel. And myself and the Writers Guild of America West in California, we reviewed my script for about 4 months, the treatment, the plot. I broke down everything for them because they promised me that they would not only get him to sign on to the film project, but I would be financially rewarded. So
absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So I felt like it was a win-win. And then nothing happened for me after I finished discussing my film with them. And it wasn't until maybe 4 or 5 years later that I found out.
They said 4 or 5 years later. When did you write the film?
I wrote it in 1998.
1998.
Yes, sir.
And when did John Q come out?
2002.
Now, explain to us what the Writers Guild is before we go into the particulars of the actual case, because right now we have a man from the south side of Chicago telling us he's the one who really wrote John Q. Now, this is a hard pill to swallow, very hard to believe. So before we go into it, which he actually wrote a book, by the way, called The No's of Men, The Yes of God, which lays out every single thing that he's talking about. Before we go into that, you have to explain to us first what a guild is and how you got involved with the Writers Guild.
Absolutely. So the Writers Guild is it's an institution outside of the Copyright Office where lay people like myself or individuals who, you know, starving artists, struggling artists who are trying to get their break, go to the Writers Guild to register their work in hopes of getting some kind of deal, some kind of development deal. But beyond that, the Writers Guild in my research is a mechanism to circumvent the copyright process. See, what they do is, and if you look at their bylaws, which I have a copy of them, they specifically say, that we do not confer statutory protection. And what that means is we are not the Copyright Office, but they're spinning people off and making people believe that they can give you prior creation when it would no otherwise exist. And so that's how they beat a lot of people in court.
So basically, they're making people think that they have the power to copyright your idea for you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And they don't.
And this is what they tried to do to you.
And this is what they tried to do to me.
Okay, so you write John Q. You give it to the Writers Guild. You don't hear anything. At first, it's looking good. You pick Denzel Washington. Things are happening. You don't hear anything for months.
Exactly.
When do you find out that they made your film and took your film?
Wow. Almost towards 2003. And one of my...
Film came out in 2001,
It came out in 2002.
2002.
But this was in the fall of 2002. It had already run its course through the theaters, and I hadn't seen it because I wasn't looking for it, and they never did a trailer. So they tried to sneak it under the radar because if I had seen that trailer, I could have gotten an injunction. I would have immediately gotten an injunction as it relates to Denzel being in a horror film.
You got to talk in English, man.
Work.
What's an injunction?
An injunction is when I get a court order to stop the release of the film until I get paid. Not just credit, but financial compensation.
Wow.
And so that didn't happen, because it was at the Dollar Show. It had already run its course in the theaters. I had no idea. So imagine my chagrin when I'm sitting.
My chagrin. Exactly.
When I'm sitting in the Dollar Show with my kids, bro, and my children are looking at the screen telling me, Dad, is this us? Did this happen to us? It was profound, man. It struck me to the core. And so
now, before we get into the
you seen it at the Dollar Show?
I saw it at the Dollar Show on 87th in Harlem.
Damn.
So it hurts, man. And you know what? And I just want the listeners can't see him right now, but when I look in his eyes, and if you look at this book is how many pages is this?
About 500.
About 500 pages.
It's a big one, though.
And you look
35-piece dinner.
And what it has is the documents from the court case. Everything, pretty much everything.
Everything, pictures.
Absolutely.
And you can see it and purchase it at therealjohnq.com. And when you look in this brother's eyes, there was no doubt in my mind, at least in my mind, that he was telling the truth. I was headed out to work, and we sat and talked for about 2.5 hours.
Long time.
And I introduced him to everyone who would listen at the radio station. He did an interview at that station. And it just pulled in my heartstrings. Now, after you find out, what's the first thing that you do? You go to the movie, you see something. I mean, this is like, I'm an MC. I've had moments where I heard someone else singing my song, but it wasn't close enough. But I'm like, I know, because I gave a person who knows that person that CD. But it's never been like this.
Yep.
So what is the first thing that you do?
So what I did, man, to be honest with you, I was in shock. Like, I literally watched that movie at least 7 times that day until the next morning. And like I said before, I wasn't getting up out of that seat unless it was to take the kids to the washroom. I was just in shock. I mean, shock and awe. It created shock and awe to my conscience, where I just sat there being able to follow the script, follow the storyline, follow some of the dialogue. And so I was like, without giving me proper credit or compensation, I just felt beside myself. And so it took me a couple of months to, pick up the pieces. And once I finally, came out of that, it was on. So it's like a big ball of yarn.
Right.
I just continued to pull at the thread, follow the money, I followed the trail, and at the end of the day, I uncovered the truth.
So
and, go ahead.
Within them 3 years, because it was proposed in 98. You made a decision on Denzel in 98,
yes.
right? Within 99 and 2000, did you call somebody back?
Yeah. Listen,
what was the
man,
process?
I was on it. Like, I followed up with the Writers Guild for at least a year and a half after that. So I was calling the Writers Guild up until probably the mid 2000s, because I had just graduated college. So I was a starving artist, bro.
Right.
I was like, man, I need to pay some bills.
But what's crazy is your foresight, because you copyrighted this film in '98, and you weren't even encouraged to copyright it.
No,
Talk to us about that.
Listen, it was the Most High. It was just something on my heart that said copyrighted. And then, hold on, I actually put the details of the film on the copyright. On my valid copyright, I specifically said that this film is about an African-American family who was dealing with a heart situation with no warning and no insurance to pay for it. Was that not what John Q was about?
Right. Exactly
1,000%. And so the Most High put that in my spirit to put it on the copyright. And so because I did that, excuse me, because I did that, the court system tried to navigate around that and circumvent my copyright by trying to uplift and uphold the Writers Guild certificate. And I just told you the bylaws from the Writers Guild said that we can't confer statutory protection, which means that we can't copyright. So then if you can't confer statutory protection, then what's your function? Their primary function is, when I sent my script, they had a round table and they chopped it up, they read it, they rearranged it, but they still stayed true to the essence of what I wrote. And so through my research, the Writers Guild West, WGA West, is a conduit to still works. It's like when you launder money, but they launder people's scripts. And so by the time they take your script in, at the end of the day, they try to totally change it. But, you know, if you have a child, you're going to recognize your child under any circumstance. I don't care if you see that child one day or 10 years from now. You're going to know my baby when I see it. So it's the same with John Q. I knew that was my work when I saw it, and they knew it. And that's why in court, they never answered a question. Now, if I may, can I just read an excerpt out of my book?
Please do. Please.
You can find this book at www.therealjohnq.com. But check this out. Now, this is not me. This is in black and white. This is the court. The court, right. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the response is really not a response. You know, you didn't answer a single question. He's talking about Town One and New Line Cinema. All of the defendants never answered a single question in court.
Any question that your lawyer
Not
asked?
one question. Now listen.
That was some of the questions your lawyer would ask.
Let me give you an example. The alleged writer James Kearns put on the copyright for John Q that was submitted in 2000 to the Copyright Office that it was created in 2000. But in court, he swore that he copyrighted in 93.
Okay. So if you read and if you look up anything about John Q, it's gonna say that James Kearns wrote it. Claims to have copywritten it in 93, but filed his copyright, which, as you say, would not even be valid with the Writers Guild
There you go.
in the year 2000, whereas your copyright was in 1998.
Absolutely. And beyond that, it says created in it says created in 2000, not in 1993. So unless you have a time machine, I don't know how that's possible. And then remember, I lived the experience, I wrote it down on paper, submitted it to the copyright, became a member of the Writers Guild, right? So it's a natural chain of events if you follow the timeline and the date. So because I beat them on the merits of the case, which, by the way, it's only 4 elements I need to prove copyright infringement. 1, originality. 2, access. 3, similarities. And 4, citizenship. And I proved through all of these documents that I won on the merits of the case. The court agreed that I won on the merits of the case, and so instead of them honoring my copyright, they said, well, Mr. Tillman, you know what? Your copyright does predate James Kearns' copyright, but in this particular case, the copyright doesn't matter. I said, wow.
And what was the court's reasoning for why the copyright doesn't matter?
They said because a copyright is in existence the moment you put it on paper. And so my argument was, well, Your Honor, I put it on paper first because my copyright says 98. His copyright says 2000. And so in America, on this planet, 98 comes before 2000. Because I don't know what kind of nightmare y'all living.
So they decided to go with the 93 argument.
Right, which he didn't have a copyright for, but he had a Writers Guild certificate. But remember, the Writers Guild says we can't confer statutory protection, which means basically what they do is try to provide prior creation when it would not otherwise exist.
So are you saying that they fabricated the documents and wrote that it was written in 1993?
They absolutely did. And now here's the proof. They gave me an article from 1993 from Variety.com. And I want all of your listeners, excuse me, I want all your listeners to look up Variety.com. It says it was created in 1996. So they gave me an article from Variety.com with saying that he wrote it in 93. And I said, well, Your Honor, that's impossible. Because the website Variety.com wasn't created till 96. 96. So how do you give me a Variety.com article from 93?
Right.
Case closed.
Right.
So I was just destroying them on the evidence. And so what the judge did, like I just said, the defendants never answered the question. So let me get back to your original question. If I said Mr. Kearns or my attorney said Mr. Kearns, you say you wrote it in 93, you copyrighted it in 93, well, why doesn't your copyright reflect it? Your copyright says created in 2000. This is how we answer the question in court. I don't understand the question. That was his answer. I don't understand the question.
And actually, really quickly, you can actually listen to the court audio on therealjohnq.com.
Yes, sir.
He actually has the actual court audio, and you can hear him say.
Now, if I didn't win on the merits of my case, how did I get an oral argument in federal court? And I'm not an attorney. But I don't need to be attorney to be a man, and I don't need an election to be a man. So I just had to stand up for my rights. So another answer to your question is, we asked Time Warner. We said, well, Time Warner, you said you paid Time Warner and New Line. Time Warner and James Kearns share copyright credit for John Q. So we produced that copyright in court, and then we said, well, Your Honor, if James Kearns and New Line Cinema, Time Warner, share copyright credit for John Q, then why did the Writers Guild pay James Kearns? You know what Time Warner said? I don't understand the question. So all of the defendants answered just like that. And I just read you a court transcripts out of my book saying that they never complied with discovery. So my rights was violated. Now let me share something else with you real quick. Another article that they gave us was from the Hollywood Reporter, allegedly written in 1994. But my question to you is this. The Hollywood Reporter article says that John Q was a film in production. And this is their proof that Kearns wrote it. My question to the judge is, Your Honor, why isn't James Kearns' name in the article? His name is not in the article. But this article is all they had to prove that he wrote it. I said, well, where is his name at?
Well, did you try contacting the reporters that allegedly wrote these articles?
I did.
Okay.
I did this in the book. But I'm going to show you something. I'm glad you asked that. Great question. Real quick. So I said, well, why isn't Kearns' name in the article? Why isn't Denzel Washington's name in the article? So what they did was fabricate, and that's what Hollywood does. First of all, and I'm not speaking about everyone because I don't know everyone in Hollywood, but I'm going to say this. The talent pool is less than desirable because how many sequels am I going to have to watch of the same movie that I watched as a kid?
You mean you're trying to see Fast and Furious 8?
Oh, yeah, I love that. Now, no, don't get it twisted. But no, on the real side, though, there's a...
No, it's true. Hollywood is known for recreating this.
Because what they do is they don't have any talent. And that's why they got to steal. And that's why they got to steal from honest, hardworking people who are organically coming up with these ideas. Now, watch this. I'm going to show you how the Most High God works. Please tell me that you're looking at this book.
I am.
This is the Holy Grail.
And listeners, this book is the Hollywood Reporter book that he's holding up right now. This is the Holy Grail.
This is the alleged article that proves that Kearns wrote John Q, but his name is not in here from 1994. Now, let me tell you why this is important.
He's kissing the book.
Now, watch this. Watch this. Because I was extremely thorough with my case, they tried to conspire against me and had all of this evidence. Why did the library throw this book in the garbage? They tried to throw this away before I could come and look at it. Here's the proof. This is a letter written April 11th.
Wait a minute. Before you get to that letter, I just want to make sure the listeners understand.
Please.
Well, make sure I understand.
Please.
I'm blaming it on the listeners.
Please.
But so this book, dated September 30th through October 31st, 1994, is a book where the Hollywood Reporter archives every article ever written?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm glad you said that. Now, let me explain that to you guys. Now, technically, we should be using white gloves with this.
Right.
Okay, so the next time we open it, we will be using to preserve it because this is an artifact now. Let me explain why. This is the mechanism in which Hollywood uses to steal people's work. Now, watch this. Let me read something to you real quick. Now, this is from the library. It says, April 11th, 2007, to whom it may concern, the library has discarded all back issues of the periodical Hollywood Reporter, including those from the year 1994. Now, out of the blue, why would you just discard all of your 1994 articles from Hollywood Reporter?
Specifically that year.
Specifically that year?
Wow.
Because I was on their butts and they knew it. And they tried to head me off. But through the grace of God, this found its way out of the garbage. because it was in the garbage. It was in the dumpster.
Right.
And let me tell you why. Because I found out that this is the conduit, or this is the mechanism that they use. See, this book comes in and out of the library every 2 to 3 months. So what they do is when they steal an artist's work, this book comes in and out of the library because look at it. It's stitched. It's in stitching, sir. Take a look at this. Look at the quality. It's a stitch. They stitch these in.
Right.
They stitch the articles in. So every time, take a look at it. So every time a case comes before the court, they have the old press. They have that old Hollywood reporter press. So what they do is go back and create articles for any time one of their own is in court. And because that book comes in and out of the library, it goes back to the Hollywood Reporter in California so that if a case comes up,
You can customize.
then they can customize it for that particular case, and then they send it back to the library.
Well, that's an easy way to prove that, right? So
Well,
you
that's
could
a
grab-
lot of
you could grab-
I have a letter from the library saying that it's in the book.
that
It's
the
in
book is constantly.
I have it in the book. If you,
Wow.
you-
Is it
listen,
only out of one library, like a Harold Washington?
Harold,
or
this is from Harold Washington.
Right, right, right.
The main library.
Right.
And see, that's what they do.
Well, what about all over the country? So if I go and get this Hollywood Reporter book and try to check it out in L.A.,
Yeah.
it'll
It
have
might not
different
be
articles.
there.
Or DC.
It's supposed to have, and see what they do is they unilaterally, systematically
Hit 25 copies.
they ship out, because this book is not in every library.
Right.
So the 20 or 30 whatever across the nation that they had us in, 40 whatever, every month or every 2 months, all of the periodicals go out at the same time. Back to VNU. I went to VNU in California, and it's
what's
in the
VNU?
book. VNU is the parent company for Hollywood Reporter. And guess what? I got a letter from their staff saying that, Mr. Tillman, we don't have any articles prior to 2001. And we destroyed all of our articles prior to 2001.
Wow.
Because they know now that this is admissible in court. Because it proves my theory that what they do is anytime a case comes up before the court, they have the power to call all of the libraries and say, we need you to send a periodical, Hollywood Reporter periodical 334. And then all of them go back to Hollywood
back
Reporter.
and got it.
And then they sew these articles in, and then they ship it back to the library. So when a layperson like myself is looking for the evidence, you're gonna find it.
We're talking once again to Jatunda Tillman. He calls himself the real John Q because he alleges that he actually wrote John Q in 1998, despite the James Kearns, who claims to have written the film that came out later on in 2000. His book is The Nose of Men, The Yes of God. You can find it on therealjohnq.com. Now, there's another piece I want to get to because we don't have
I know
a lot of time.
We don't got a lot of time, but
But there's one more piece I want to get to. I want to make sure we get this out.
Sure.
You had some troubles as quickly as you can because it is a lot to it. You had some troubles with your attorneys and you had to become your own attorney. Can you talk to us about the struggles of a creative trying to fight this type of fight and having to go through the legal system to do it when you can't trust your own attorneys?
Absolutely, because unfortunately, until you find an honest attorney who's really going to have your back and honor and respect the law, it's an uphill battle, but it's not impossible. I had attorneys who sabotaged my case, who was bought off, who tried to tell me that this Hollywood Reporter article was legit or that Variety.com article was legit when I graduated from Chicago State, and I have common sense, and I know how to do research. And so when I go back and investigate all of this, and what you say is not true, then your credibility with me is zero.
What's next for you? What's coming up next? And how can we support you moving forward as you fight this? Even aside from this, what are you doing creatively? And how can we support you and make things happen for you?
Okay, I need everybody in the world to go to www.therealjohnq.com. You can purchase the book. You can make a donation. Right now, I'm in the process of working on another film, another independent film, because I want to be autonomous from Hollywood because I'm not playing that game. And I want to preserve my manhood and my dignity. And so my mission is to work as independent as I can unless the right relationships are built. Because until the right relationships are built, I'm on my own.
Promise to come back when you got that film ready, when you
Absolutely.
got that play ready. Last
Consider
thing.
it done.
I want to ask you, so the story John Q, that actually happened to you. So your son was in the
Absolutely.
Thank you. Good question.
Absolutely.
How's your son?
we did-
Well,
how's
actually,
everything?
I don't want to say the sex of the child,
Right.
but
I apologize.
No.
No.
It's
You didn't-
I actually
it's
said it
your
already.
daughter.
It's
Right.
cool.
The show, so I apologize.
Because
I'm sorry.
it's
man.
all good, but the bottom line is my child is doing phenomenal right now, and it's nothing but the Most High who got my child through it. But in the film, they did try to change the sex of the child, but the dialogue was predominantly between myself and my son. And that's the thing. They tried to change it, rearrange it, but they still stay true to the essence of what I wrote because
Right.
it was that good.
Right.
And remember, they had 1,000 times to edit the film. I never had an opportunity to edit my first raw, rugged piece, and they still stay true to it.
Man, I keep saying last thing, but I do have one more if we got time.
Talk to me.
Okay, we got what, 2 minutes? Yeah. So, with everything that's going on with healthcare right now, right? You got President Trump right now. His repeal and replace Obamacare act just went through the House. It's on its way to the Senate. What do you recommend for parents who have these illnesses that befall their children and they don't have health insurance, or they don't know what to do, especially with your child? Was this a pre-existing condition?
Yeah.
So when you have, if this goes through the Republican dominated government right now, pre-existing conditions may not be covered, and that's what your child had. How do parents fight through this?
Well, first, I'm still waiting on the check from Denzel Washington because he promised to cut me a check if I let him out of the case. But at the same time, I'm going to continue to fight for what's mine. But to your question, I believe that we, the people, have the power. I never looked for President Obama to help me or bail me out of my situation. I never looked to anybody to get me out of the situation I'm in. I just continue to work hard. I graduated college. I did all of the right things, and I'm in business. I'm pushing forward. But I would recommend that us, the people, we got to unite, and we got to be the change we want to see, because the politicians are beholden to us, and I think that they forget that. But if we as Americans, black, white, brown, stick together, we can shut the entire system down and make them bend to the will of the people.
We're going to have him back soon, man. There's so much to uncover. That's Chatunda Tillman Sr. I keep saying Junior. Chatunda Tillman Sr.,
So how
the
old-
real John Q.
How old is your daughter? I mean, how old is your child?
Almost 20.
Wow.
Almost 20.
Doing it.
That's a
doing
blessing.
It well.
In
And,
college?
Praise God
Oh,
for
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Now,
Come on, man. He said, come on,
Now,
man.
even though
HBCU or PWI? Which one?
a little of both.
Okay. That's
But
what's
the
up.
She in
thing
school.
is,
They in
we
school. They in
just want to
school.
motivate the children to do well, stay in school, and we teaching them about business, but it's still nice to have that piece of paper just to show that you can complete something. That's what it boiled down to, because the only way we're gonna survive is unless we entrepreneurs.
That's what's up.
That's
man.
right. Thank you so much for coming
No,
to the show.
Thank you
You
so
guys.
much
Thank
for
you
coming, man.
guys.
I appreciate
Scoops
you.
Radio.
And listen, he and I have a chance to chat, and you learned a lot about a person as
We
you
gonna
find
bring
out
him
their
back.
story. So we got.
This was not enough time. You got to have a whole.
No, it's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate
Because
the
we're
opportunity.
gonna read. We're gonna try to read up in and try to dig more questions.
Yeah, I've been
We
reading
have
it
so
too.
many questions, but
Hey,
Yeah.
Man.
So
Scoops Radio back at it. WIIT at 8.9.
if you want to see
Chatunda
everything,
Tillman.
Chatunda Tillman Jr.
Chatunda.
Senior. If you want to see everything that's in the book, go to therealjohnq.com. You can also hear the court audio. You can also hear interviews with James Kearns, which I thought was interesting that he included that on the website, and see the difference in the passion with which they speak. You got me convinced, because if you wrote a story with this much
Right.
gumption when you talk about it, there's a different way that you speak about it.
Yeah.
So he has interviews of James Kearns on his website. So man, big ups to Chatunda Tillman. Make sure y'all support this brother and things he got coming up.
And what's the website
Nose
again?
Man, yes, to God.
www.therealjohnq.com. And thank you guys.
No doubt.
Oh, yeah, the Scoops Radio. WIIT at 8.9. Let's go.